I'm Nicholas Sledgianowski. So my talk is on practical software estimation, and it's just about what seems to work for people. I'm not. There's some theory about how you can get the most accurate estimates. That's not what this is about. This is about what seems to work for people that I've talked to and what's practical in kind of like the agile environment. Um, so yeah, I kind of based this on some software estimation interviews I did well, this year and last year, mainly with some people who've been in the industry and have some experience, at least just get some talks from other people. And it's kind of like for software estimating, at least, it's not something we talk about a lot as we're like training people. Like, I don't think anything in my computer science classes really talks about estimates. And then when I started on the job, I was at an agency, and people were like, all right, how many story points do you want for the story, or how long do you think this is going to take? And it's very much at a very low level, and it's also kind of like in a quick pace where you're just like, we got 10 people in a room and we all have to agree on this right now, and people are going on these long tangents that take 15 minutes, and then you have like 6 stories left to estimate. So that's kind of what motivates me to kind of pursue this. Let's go next slide. All right. So my first interview subject, basically he is a boot camp grad, and he basically is doing very well, got promoted a couple of times. I think he has a couple of years of experience at this point, might just be 1 or so. It's kind of just talking about like one point that came up was how well do people understand the point system? Because in like classical agile, they will often make you go to this agile alignment meeting, just basically like 1 hour or 2 hours. You have a whole team in there, and it's just the project managers talking about what is the story point, what are all the ceremonies, and if you've been in the industry for a while, you've heard these things many times already. So it's very easy to tune out and not really pay attention. But what will happen a lot is people will have these arguments about what the story points are, or what the units or estimating things at. And if people don't agree on what they are, and one guy thinks it's an hour and one guy thinks it's a story point, it can be very tricky. So that's one problem. And then another thing that can happen is, and that makes estimates for software pretty complicated, is not everyone starts at the same base point on each task. So I've been working with AWS Athena and SQL a lot over the last couple of months, so I'm very dialed in on that. So if you have like some kind of reporting change or something you want to make, I wrote all that code. So for me, all the work that needs to be done if I take on that task is, oh, I know I just need to change these things, and then we're done. But if we take one of my teammates, he has to catch up to me essentially in how the software works, what are the different components, and how to blend it together. So he has this learning component and then the work component. And in this example, at least, the learning component is vastly larger than the actual work component. And a lot of estimating best practice, whatever, we'll look at the whole team and say, for an average person on a team, how long it will take to estimate this, or how long it will take to do this work. But in a learning dominated task like this, it feels very strange to estimate it with the average person, when that's going to be so much of the work is just the learning that's one person specific. And these are just some of the highlights from these interviews. I don't want to go too deeply into them. Let's go to the next one. So this one is, he's basically right now he does some consulting he's semi-retired, but he's basically did well in one of his businesses and been semi-retired for like 20 years now. But his work is very solo, so he's working mostly by himself, and he writes like more embedded kind of software for like race cars and stuff. So his kind of highlights having a good specification is very critical, which is different from a lot of the stuff in the agile world or the corporate world, where you're like, we don't really have a specification. So you have kind of and he's like, we gotta have a specification is very important, and the team's experience in the doing is really what matters, or really matters when estimating. If he's really serious about the thing, you have specification and you know like the domain, then you can get a good estimate and your project will work out pretty well. Which is just very different from most of what I'm used to, because I've not really estimated anything of this specification professionally. It's been all agile and like we've got these user stories or something. It's very different. All right, and then our last one. So this is a CTO at a company I used to work for, and we still stay in touch occasionally. And he didn't actually make it this time out. I think the times are rough for him, but it means that everyone who's watching the presentation actually has not been interviewed for these. So I think that's good. Kind of base estimates on what you've done before. And if you're unsure, haven't done it before, multiply by 50 to 100%. That's a pretty standard rule. It's just to take the estimates the engineers have, or what seems reasonable to you, and just double it. And then sometimes people don't want to hear the truth about how long something will take. And that's kind of, it's true. I'm not sure how. I've definitely been in a situation where I've just given whatever rough estimates I had and kind of use it for proposals without being too specific. But honestly, I've just kind of just said whatever I thought the estimate was, and then people will let people push back and change it. But all right, move on from that one. All right, so those are all the interviews. So this is going back to my other blog. I have multiple blogs. Estimating.dev is basically my blog about estimating for software. I'm not sure why I have estimation.dev here. I think I actually don't have the domain anymore. But I've done a number of like blog posts and things. But motivation is really can we find a better way to do software estimates? And I do want to do educational materials, but honestly, I don't know if there's like a lot of progress to be made in the software estimation world. So that's something I definitely want to hear you guys' take on. So a couple more things I have on this is, these are things out of blog posts I wrote. But this basically, the concept is there's no, like Agile, we talk about what is the team's estimate for this? And we kind of like average people together, or you planning poker. But in reality, the team is some group of like 5 to 10 engineers, and there's a lot of turnover. So I've been, at least when I was at Amazon, we lost one person every other month minimum. So you're talking in a year, you're losing half your team at least. So if you have actually saved these estimates and you want to like calibrate what your actual results were versus the estimates, well, your team that was doing the estimating is totally different from the people who are around now. You're working on different projects, and you don't have a track record of like, oh, I estimated this task like this and it actually took this long. So you can't calibrate your estimates. You don't know, you never really get a sense of like, I usually estimate 10% over or 20% over based on data. You just kind of like have to get a feeling for it. And if you even bother to look back at tickets, which usually, I'll be honest, I don't really look and see how I did. Yeah. And then I think I have one more. Learning versus doing. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but there's very much like in software, at least, there's a part where we're learning about the code, and then there's a part where we're actually doing the work. And for every person, it can be like different amounts depending on the task, which makes it kind of hard to do like a general purpose estimate unless you go to the lowest common denominator. But then if you have the lowest common denominator person do the work, you're basically spending more money for no reason. You could have your top guy do the work in one day. So it's, I guess it's kind of tricky. So yeah, there's a lot more to figure out. I'm just paying attention to the software estimating stuff, but I didn't really discover anything revolutionary. I read a couple books and did these interviews. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. And yeah, all the photos are from Unsplash. They're free, unlicensed. Well, they're licensed, but they're free use photos. And yeah, the blog is estimating.dev, not estimation.dev. And yeah, thanks for coming to SledgeConf. Any questions on the software estimation stuff?
I have one. So I know in that third interview you said you interviewed a CTO, and he usually says estimate that a task might take up to double the amount of time that you think it might. Do you think there's like a magic multiple or like a magic number that you can multiply a task by, where 90% of the time that's usually how long that task is going to take? Or do you think it's not that easy?
I think there's definitely something to be said for that. If you, it's very task specific, and one of the problems in the software is like all of our tasks are very different, because we can have all these different architectures which make it very inconsistent about how long doing a particular thing takes. So I think it's really just a rule of thumb where you're like, oh, my thumb is like this big, and if we multiply by 100%, it'll work. But as to like, I think some people might be able to do that if you're doing like if you're doing WordPress work and you're configuring or doing custom WordPress or doing something very consistently, like the same kind of tooling and the same kind of websites, I think you might be able to say, oh, this task usually is a 1 or 2 day thing. But I'm just not, most of the work I do has not been that consistent or predictable as to what exactly is going on.
Yeah. Also, the way you talked about the entire team deciding, I know there's this phenomenon like in statistics where whenever you get a large group of people and you ask them about like a certain number or you ask them to guess a certain number or certain figure, when they tend to answer it in a crowd, all their answers tend to converge to that one number, and that number tends to be the answer most often. So I was just wondering, is that something that you've seen in your research, or did you ever come across it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a common thing. I wouldn't really call my research is I read 2 books on estimation. I just interviews and I thought about it. So I wouldn't put too much authority on my research, but I think that's a common thing. Usually when you have a bunch of estimates from people and you kind of combine them, you get better accuracy. But my main concern on that is mainly that you don't get the feedback loop of, oh, I said it would take this much time, but actually it took 3 times that much. Why is my estimate personally wrong? As opposed to, oh, the team average together was 3 days, but actually it was 5 days. I guessed 3 days, or I guess 5 days, or whatever. So you don't really have a lot of like where you calibrate. Like if you read the literature on estimates, calibrating your estimates is a big deal, and they talk about different like puzzles and tests you can do and that kind of thing. But we never even bother with that in software estimation.
Okay.
Most of the time. So it's definitely true that if you combine the estimates, you should get a better estimate. But it's more like we don't record anything other than the group estimate is really what I think is probably a bad approach.
I see. Do you think that's where like task documentation comes in? Where I know a lot of people, especially a lot of team managers, they're very stringent about people documenting their tasks. Is that because they want to, let's say, take the amount of time that you said a task was going to take and get the amount of time it actually took, and kind of get like your personal multiplier as to like how much you tend to underestimate or overestimate a task? Do you think that's the thing?
I mean, that would be awesome if people did that. I've only worked in a couple teams or organizations where people really were paying attention to like the numbers and things. And they were doing scaled agile framework, and then and just one client we worked with had really good project managers, and it was very much an anomaly. And then everyone else has kind of just been, oh, we estimated something, and then it kind of just doesn't go anywhere. It's mostly used as like a gauge to like are we going to complete this in this sprint or next sprint? It seems to be all
Okay.
that management really cares about. Maybe we need to interview some actual dev team managers. Probably useful.
All right, I have a question. So when you're coming up with these like timeline estimates, how often are the estimates pushed back because of requirements from other teams that are not your team? So, you know, for example, let's say you're like, all right, we have our development plan ready to go, and then something comes down from another one, and then you have to explain to the boss. Can you explain that kind of timeline from your development side? Because I only see it from the request side and then the result side, never the what goes on in the back end, how that affects time.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the flow in my understanding is you'll have, and I'll just give you kind of like the agency level, you'll have some kind of like statement of work or something, which is mostly the sales team or the CTO and the VPs or whatever. They'll say, oh, we're going to build you this kind of platform on the cloud. We're going to have CI/CD. We're going to do all these things. And then as they're kind of doing this, the scope of work, they'll talk to some of the senior engineers, and they'll be like, oh, we think setting up Jenkins will take a month, and setting up the ECS clusters will take another month. And in total, we're looking at about 3 months, and they'll multiply it by 100% or whatever, somewhere in there, and they'll adjust it a little bit to make sure the billing works right for the agency and the kind of like number of people we have, that kind of thing. So then that'll all get worked out. And some number of weeks later, we'll actually start the project and we'll actually find out which people we have. And then there might be like a week or two of planning or something, and then we'll actually start on the project. So let's say we're starting to set up the ECS clusters or something, and somebody wants to write jobs to deploy things. And usually you'll be like maybe a week or two in, and you'll realize, oh, this other person is not ready yet. And then you kind of are going to be feeding that up the line. So it'll be, let's say I'm writing like a Jenkins job or something, but our team has not decided what each type of instance types to use or something. And then you kind of have to escalate up. I feel like my example has kind of gotten lost. Could you go back to your question, Jerry?
Yeah, no, that made sense. I mean, it's just more of a, you know, just what that looks like from the back end, just of what that communication structure was. So that definitely answered it from there.
So like another example I had is, this was a long time ago, but basically we were building a new software platform for a client, and one of our dependencies was a service that the client was building, and we built our system based on the spec they gave us. They said, oh, we're going to have these endpoints, and they're going to do this, this, and this. So you just build your service, integrate it in the website, and we'll be good. So then we get like 2 weeks in, we haven't really heard anything from the team on the client side that's supposed to be building this dependency. But we know kind of like what our API is going to look like, and that kind of thing. So we're like, all right, let's start putting this together. So we basically build the integrations and that kind of thing. We've set up like a stub of the service. So probably maybe 4 to 6 weeks in, we're ready to go. We're ready to start integrating with the other service. So like, hey, where are you? Are you guys ready for us to integrate? And they're like, oh, we're not going to be ready for another 2 weeks or something. So like, all right. So I'm not sure what we did for the 2 weeks. I think we did some other tasks that were on the contract or something. So we get 2 weeks forward, and we're like, okay, here's the connection. We start connecting. We're making requests to their service, and we're like, all right, none of our API calls are working. What's going on here? So we then go back and we're like, hey, we made these requests to your service, and it's not working. I'm like, oh, actually, the endpoints, we changed them. The actual the schema that's on the server that the server says it has, it's actually wrong. We just didn't update that. Here's the actual schema. So then we're like, now finally figuring out why this isn't working. So we probably have another week or two to update to the actual schema that they have. And then that information has to be channeled up to the management level and then to the VPs probably, Jay, before anybody's going to find out, which could maybe take a couple days. So we're probably 6 weeks into the project and we're finding out that the dependency is not ready or it's not doing what they're saying. And then we're got another couple weeks to update it, but we don't necessarily find out until kind of the last minute oftentimes. And then you're kind of baked into some kind of project delay already.
Okay, makes sense.
Also, Nick, for the people that you chose to interview, I know that a lot of in a lot of daily huddles, what people do is there's usually a product manager, a CTO, and the product manager, product manager, CTO, and project manager. So maybe the project manager has some insight into this because they're usually tracking everything that everyone's doing. So
Do you mean
that's,
like the daily stand-ups?
Yeah. Especially in the startups that I've worked, it's usually been the CTO, the product manager, and the project manager that have been the kind of conducted the daily stand-ups. So I think the project manager kind of has like all the behind the scenes knowledge on people's progress and how they're doing.
That's definitely the idea for project managers. I've seen mostly when I've had actual pure project managers that are focused on like where are people's tasks, where are the estimates, are we following the ceremonies, that kind of thing. That's mostly been in the agency where we had project managers as part of our agency, and then the product owners were on the client side. And we had to be like, what hours did everybody work? Where are we on the deliverables for the client? And that kind of thing. The project managers kind of kept busy. And that is basically what you'd hope the project managers are doing, is keeping track of like what we estimated, and are we doing all the procedures? Did people forget about their tickets? Are we keeping track of everything? And then the product owners hopefully are thinking about what are we building? Are the different components all happening? What is actually going to be a good product, that kind of thing. And usually like in my world, we'll have at the stand-ups, maybe we'll have a project manager or a product owner and like a software development team manager, which in a startup world is probably just the CTO, honestly, and a bunch of devs. Formally for Agile, you're only really supposed to have devs in the stand-up or Scrum or something, but I've not really seen that actually happen. And another thing that I've seen a lot of is people who are product managers and product owners kind of mixed together, and they don't know exactly what their role is, or it's not clearly defined. So then you have people who are like, maybe they were a business analyst, but now they're doing stand-ups, and they're also telling you like, oh, this is the medical regulations that we have to follow for XYZ or something. Yeah, a lot of it is just like the industry is not, there's not a lot of like, a software engineer isn't really a formally certified engineer, and a product owner is just somebody who was given a job role at the business and don't necessarily have a training. At Amazon, they mostly have MBAs, but it's like an MBA isn't necessarily going to prepare you to be a product owner. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. I got it.
All right. So I'm going to call that my